Hey everybody, it's Steven from Asian Boss. Can you imagine starting a company from scratch and growing it to a multi-billion-dollar public company? Doesn't exactly sound like a walk in the park, right? What if I told you that there's someone who achieved that feat before he even reached the age of 30? Tim Hwang is the co-founder of FiscalNote, a global software, data, and media company in the US, and is the youngest Asian American CEO. Having attended both Princeton and Harvard, one might be forgiven in thinking that he was destined to be this great leader who had everything handed to him. But what people don't often see is the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into building anything, let alone building a billion-dollar company. So what's Tim's story, and what are the lessons to be learned from his incredible success? Let's dive in. So Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, great to be on.
For those people who might not be familiar with the type of work you do, is that right that you're officially the youngest Asian American CEO of a public company?
I am. Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's definitely a title that I earned, last year for sure.
Obviously, the next logical question becomes, how old are you?
Well, I just turned 31, so that's
crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's old, but it's not old in Silicon Valley, right?
You've literally gone from 0 to 1, where you started a company from nothing to literally going IPO. That was last year?
Yeah, in August of 22, yeah.
How's life right now?
It's busy, for sure. As I'm sure you know, running a startup is hard in and of itself, but going public is a whole different beast, right? So you go out there, you take the company public, you ring the bell in the New York Stock Exchange, and then in some ways, the company doesn't change that much because you still have to keep doing what you've been doing for years and years and years, right? You have to build good products, you have to service customers, you have to manage a great team and build a great culture. But now you have all this public pressure, right? So you have sellers and buyers of your stock every single day that are watching how the company performs. You have the press that's like constantly hounding you about the performance of different product lines or different business units or different geographies. You yourself with your CFO have to basically go on the road and tell everybody about what you're working on and convince people to really give confidence in the business. And so it's a different challenge for sure, but it's fun for sure.
Let's take a step back to let's say, I don't know, when you were in elementary school. What did you want it to be then? Yeah,
that's a good question. So I remember one of the first childhood memories that I had actually was in elementary school. They make you do this thing, I think it's in kindergarten and first grade, where on the first day of class, the teacher comes up to you and says, I want you to take some construction paper and I want you to make a figure of what you want to be in the future. Mm. And so they go around, they can encourage you to cut out the pants and put the shirt on and put the hat on and all stuff. And actually I remember after at the end of the day, everybody would post their little figure, cartoon figure onto the wall. So, most people, they put like astronaut or like, firefighter or something or whatever. I actually wanted to be a lawyer. And this was like at 6 years old, and I don't know what it was. Maybe, I just really was really interested in like chasing down bad guys and like, I think there's like this old idea, like this Korean idea of like a prosecutor, like kicking down doors and like, dragging bad guys to jail and stuff. And it was really weird because I was like the only guy that had like this person in like a suit and tie or whatever, right? But I think more than anything else, I just had this really strong fascination with the law, and that sort of carried me all the way through FiscalNote and everything. But I think like most people, you kind of go through different ideas of what you want to be. Personally, I never thought I'd be a tech founder. I all the way through even college, I would say junior year in college, from elementary school, middle school, high school, college, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so I don't know what it was, but I think somewhere along the line, I think in college I just said, hey, it's not what I want to do, and ended up completely switching 180 into the technology world.
Your parents are from Korea. And so when did you end up in the US?
So my parents immigrated to the United States in the late 1980s. So if you recall, at the time, South Korea was going through quite a big political transition. The democratic movements were, I would say, at an apex. and the constitutional reforms that were taking place in the country, it basically resulted in the toppling of a military dictatorship and then representative democracy for the first time in the country. And so most people don't know this, but the Korean version of democracy has only been around for, call it 30 or so years, 30, 40 years or so. But in that time period, my parents had come from a religious and academic background, and they came to the United States partially because they thought that during this time period of political turmoil in the country, that the U.S. would be a little bit more stable, and that they'd be able to, bring a lot of stability to the family and sort of, give their children a better life, right? And so my parents came here in the late 80s, and I was born in the 90s. I was born actually in the Midwest in Michigan, and I believe my parents are telling me that they're probably one of the only Asian people and definitely the only Korean people in central Michigan at the time.
What was it like then growing up as like an only Asian kid in the neighborhood?
Well, I think it's a mix of feelings for sure. For me as an Asian American, I personally don't think I came into reality of or came to terms with my Asian American identity, I'd say late into my teenage or early adulthood years. If anything, I actively tried to push back against it, right? And so, when you're especially a second generation, Asian American immigrant in the United States, your parents make you do a lot of things, right? They, make you go to language school on Saturday mornings. They drag you to class or whatever, and it's so annoying. And then, they make you speak Korean or Chinese or Japanese or whatever at home. And then, they tell you to do all these traditions and customs and things that you don't really, agree with. And so when I was in elementary, middle school, and high school, I remember I just would push back against my parents all the time. It's like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to learn this? It's not even that important. And then I think, I kind of grew up a little bit and eventually just realized that, it is part of who I am. And, I sort of need to embrace it. But, definitely growing up as a singular or, minority in this community, it gives you a strong sense of wanting to assimilate and to be part of American culture. And I think when you're young and impressionable, that really is, that's the draw that you want to get pulled into overall.
So even at that young age, like, did you believe in that the American ideal, where, you just, like, the American dream, is that something that you thought about, or you just wanted to be like everybody else? And I'm guessing you're pretty, like, a studious guy in school, right?
Well, I think, I strongly have always believed that hard work equals success. And so, whether that's in academics or in entrepreneurship or in anything else, I think that there's a direct correlation between the amount of effort that you put in and the number of at-bats you get in terms of being able to hit a home run, right? And so I don't know if that's an Asian ideal or an American ideal. I think that's just something that I grew up with. It's definitely something that my parents taught me. And it's something that I internalized for sure at an early age.
But did you feel like, I don't know, even at that age, hey, this stuff is just way too easy for me? Because, you are literally one of the smartest guys I know. I just wonder if it's something that you kind of knew for yourself even at such a young age, or you kind of came to terms with the fact that, oh, okay, I guess I'm kind of smarter than the average Joe.
I don't think that all the time. I think, I don't think I'm smarter than the average Joe. I think I definitely work harder than the average Joe. But I remember, when I was in middle school and high school, I pushed myself really, really hard. And so I'll give you a good example, right? In the 8th grade, this is like the 3rd year in middle school or the like, I remember distinctly there were kids that were much, much smarter than me. It's like I would study for an exam all night and then, I'd get an A, but they get 100%, right? And they wouldn't even try that hard. And so I remember just being in this environment where, you just needed to be, I don't know what it was, I just wanted to be the best and I wanted to push myself really hard. And so starting in high school, I did some really crazy stuff. Like I tried to skip 2 grades in math and in English by accelerating courses by myself over the summer. By the time I finished high school, I'd finished 23 AP exams, which was effectively enough to graduate college within a semester if I'd gone to certain universities and the like. And so.
And you did that by yourself?
I did it by myself, yeah. And I remember pushing myself really, really, really hard. I don't know what it was. There's sort of this inherent drive. And I remember every year the College Board has this little award that they give to people who pass the most number of AP exams in the state, right? They give one male and one female across all 50 states in America. And I remember going from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, and I was looking up this thing, and I was like, oh man, how many exams do I need to get this #1 prize in the state of Maryland? And I looked it up, and it was like 21 or 22. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to take 23, and I'm going to do it by my junior year, within 3 years. And so I did it. I just put out a plan, 3-year plan, how many college courses I was going to take over the course of this 3-year period, and then I just finished it, and I finished my entire high school curriculum, by junior year. So
technically, can anybody do that if they wanted to?
They can. But so one AP course is the equivalent of essentially of one college course, right? So it's theoretically you can. I mean, if you just put in the effort and you sit there and study all day and you sort of memorize the exams. I remember during AP exam weeks when you'd be taking the actual final exams. For 3 weeks straight, I was sleeping 90 minutes a day or something. Just blindly studying, trying to pass these exams and stuff. So, but yeah, I to your earlier question, I don't know what it was. I mean, I think I just really wanted to push myself that hard, and I to be honest, I don't accredit it to intelligence or anything. I think I just sat down and said I'm going to do it, and just did it.
But you must have wanted it badly. Either you wanted to prove something, either to yourself or to your parents. What do you think was that driving factor, the motivator?
I always felt like I was an outsider, and so felt like as an outsider, you have to prove yourself to be an insider. For certain people, if you look a certain way or you're part of a certain culture, you don't have to try that hard. You're an insider, right? But in this American society, this multicultural, sort of multiracial, multi-ethnic society, especially in communities that are a little more homogenous, I think you have to stand out a little bit more. And so, especially when you're going through adolescence, right? Middle school and high school, you want to be that high school football captain or whatever, student body president or something, and it was just part of trying to sort of fit in, I would say, overall.
But does that type of lifestyle or the fact that you're studying your ass off, does that leave any time for social activities or extracurricular activities, whatnot?
I was very active in high school.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, I was. So in high school, I was on the debate team for sure. Did Model UN. I was class president. If there's, obviously there's a lot of things to do. And then actually, that's when my interests in civic society and society in general started to really take off. And so 2 kind of material experiences, I would say. The first was getting involved in politics.
From high school? From
high school, actually. So I remember interning for, my local congressman and licking the envelopes, sending them to voters and knocking on doors and asking them, what they felt about a particular issue. I remember working for our local prosecutor as he was running for re-election and going to the county fair and talking to voters and things like that. So I was actually very, very politically involved. So on the weekends when I wasn't studying, I was literally going out and handing out flyers to people, getting them to re-elect some folks. And then and this is maybe where some of the entrepreneurship came in, but my first company actually, this was when I was in high school. I started when I was in freshman year. And it wasn't a big operation or anything, but it was basically, I was connecting students with tutors. So if you had taken algebra last year, then maybe you get the student that was consistently getting A's and you have them tutor the student from last year. And so you would just take a little bit of a brokerage fee, and then what I would do is I would take all of the revenue from that and then I would funnel it into a charity. So we'd fill backpacks with school supplies, or we'd basically take these bags and fill them with blankets and toiletries, and we'd give them to homeless people, in DC and Baltimore and Chicago and around the country. And so I feel like I had this sort of early organizing.
Community organizing.
Yeah, it's community organizing, but it's like I sort of started to develop these skill sets around like getting people rallied around an idea, and then having people sort of show up to the thing, and then having them work towards like a common goal. And so that wasn't even like entrepreneurship to me. That was just like, you know, politics and volunteering and kind of helping people out in the community and the like.
Something that kind of you just were interested in anyway, so it didn't probably even feel like you're doing extra stuff, right? You found it fun?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, everything was fun, right? I mean, you know, like talking to voters was fun, and talking about policy issues was fun, and organizing these people to earn some money, and then, you know, to give back to the community was fun. And, you know, it was just like the whole, like my formative years growing up was just a whole fun experience for sure.
I don't know if too many people can relate to your experience as a high school, because you just, to me, it sounds like you've occupied that sort of leadership position from a very early age. You were just like class president and everything. So do you, I don't know, do you feel like you could just relate to an average person though, who might not, what if they got bullied or you know, they just got depressed in school or something like that? Have you ever gone through like any kind of struggle in school?
Oh, I mean, every day is a struggle.
But that's because you're trying really hard to ace every exam and everything, right?
Well, I mean, you know, I think as an Asian American, I was bullied a lot in elementary school, middle school. I mean, you know, classic four eyes, where are you from, all that stuff. Like the comments are, you know, like you just kind of get used to it over the years. You know, like there's always the common refrain of like, your mom packs you, you know, like Korean food for lunch, and then you open it in the cafeteria, and everyone's like, oh, what does that smell? You know, like, like that kind of stuff. Like you know, you just kind of learn to live with it for sure. And I never really I mean, I think it used to bother me when I was really, really young, but at some point I just kind of like, it's just like kind of, you know, it is what it is, right? To be honest, a lot of it comes down to, you know, wanting to prove to myself and to, you know, to everyone that I care about that I can do something, right? And so if I, to be honest, like was really reflective about like what that particular ultimate drive was, I mean, I feel like it's, you know, there are definitely times that I felt very depressed because I couldn't meet my own expectations, or like, you know, no matter how hard I tried at something, there was always gonna be someone that's better at me, right? Like, I remember I played a musical instrument, I played clarinet in high school, and then, you know, I like sit there practicing for hours and hours and hours and hours, and then, you know, trying to get into some program or something, and then, you know, some kid walks in with some like musical genius ability without practicing at all, and then like they just like walk on stage, you know, and like, like that's like, you know, it's just sort of depressing, I think, to realize that. And, you know, in some ways, actually, I felt that way when I went to college, because when I went to college...
Where did you go to college?
I went to Princeton. And when I went to college, I remember there's so many smart kids around me, and no matter how hard I tried, like I was definitely not going to be the smartest person in the room. Like it's just, it's like not, it was unfathomable. It was not going to happen. Like, you know, I remember like sometimes it'd be like sitting around the table, like banging our heads, like trying to like study for an exam or do homework or whatever. And then, you know, like kids, they would be like these, you know, math Olympiads or something, and they just walk in and just ace the exam, you know, like, so.
So you majored in mathematics?
I did major in so I majored in public policy, and I had a very heavy bent to computer science, and so there's a lot of math courses and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's that's very hard, and I think you know, part of becoming an adult is realizing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and realizing like what your strengths are, and trying to figure out sort of how to use your strengths to position yourself in the right way. And I think I was feeling that through high school, and then as I started to hit college, I definitely started to internalize that, like, hey, you know, for me at least, effort matters a lot, and putting in a lot of hours matters a lot. And even if I don't look a certain way, or if I'm not the smartest person in the room, the thing that I can definitely beat them on is I can get up in the morning at 5 in the morning, and I can work until 1 a.m. and I'll do that every single day. And if I do that 365 days a year, you know, over a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, then, you know, that effort will compound on itself over time.
I mean, personally, I can relate to that a lot, but then I bet you that people, even still to this day, they look at you and say, oh, of course, because Tim's super smart. I don't think people actually see how much work you had to put in, not just building the company, but just entire lifetime worth of like just hard work. Do you feel that, or do you feel like people just take that for granted and they always attribute that to your natural ability? Or how many people really talk about hard work?
There's this myth of entrepreneurship that like everything is like an overnight success, right? Because like people don't, to be honest, people don't really care that much about other people. You know, they're so focused on their own lives. But yeah, I mean, look, when I look through my own parents' history and my own history through entrepreneurship, it's not an easy ride, right? Like my parents came to the United States in the 80s. They spoke zero English. My parents would tell me all the time about how they would struggle to order at McDonald's because they didn't know how to read the menu, right? So like, and in that time period, there wasn't like these big support communities or anything. It was like just them by themselves.
Yeah.
My father was always a public employee in the government, and so he'd be toiling away, like basically, like working in the government and everything. My mother was a small business owner, so she ran a cafe, a small coffee shop actually, by herself, no employees, just by herself. And so I remember growing up, middle school, elementary school, in order to pay for like textbooks and tutoring and that kind of stuff, my mom would get up at 4 a.m. She would go to Costco and she would like pick up bread and fruits and stuff, and then we gather as a family in the living room and we'd wrap the bread like in saran wrap. No, really, and then we'd stick it in her car. She'd go driving because she'd sell it in the cafe, and then like that extra cash she would use to essentially pay out to like a piano teacher or something, right? So like,
oh man.
For me, it wasn't like everything was handed or anything, right? Like, I think my parents worked really hard. And even for me, like when I was going to college, there was no way that I was going to be able to afford college unless I got scholarship and financial aid. And so that's part of the reason why I studied so hard, is because I really, really needed to get a scholarship. Like there was just no way that I could afford, private university. And so, I studied really hard, got financial aid and scholarships and everything to go to college. And it's just, I feel like that's the necessity of, just growing up, is that you just have to take responsibility for things and try and push yourself forward.
I love that word, responsibility. I just feel like it's something that not many people talk of these days, like personal accountability, personal responsibility. I think the days that we live in right now, it's more about people having a certain sense of entitlement, and then it's like, oh, it's too comfortable, right? But it sounds like you just had everything going against you and your family, that you just had to push yourself that hard, because otherwise there's just no other way, right?
I mean, look, I don't want to make it seem like we were totally not blessed, right? Like my parents, they had the means to come to the United States, and I was born in the United States, right? I wasn't born in some other developing market, emerging country. My parents to this day still married, and so and they come from a loving family. They're very religious. They have a very strong sense of responsibility and ethical backgrounds. And within that environment, I was born along with my younger sister and the like. And so I like that sort of combination of things, like being born in the US to my parents, blah, 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 blah. I view that as actually extremely lucky.
Yeah.
And I don't view that as, I don't take that for granted for sure. But, I also think that we had our own fair share of challenges, and I don't claim that like we have the hardest challenges, but I definitely think that I came from a pretty middle class background, and have definitely tried to make my way own forward for sure.
So when you went to college, you still had that vision of becoming a lawyer? Is that something that your parents were thinking, yeah, our son's going to go on to become a lawyer?
My senior year in high school, I had this crazy idea that I was going to be a politician. And
well, it's not so crazy because of all the stuff you've been doing.
No, that's true. But like my parents thought it was cute. Like they're like, oh, he's going out and volunteering. And then so I ended up working for the Obama campaign.
Yes. Well, we should get into that.
Yeah.
So how old were you exactly when you decided to, and what steps did you take to be part of the Obama campaign?
I think I was 15 or 16 years old at the time. And
jeez.
One of my friends basically called me and he said, hey, there's this guy, you probably haven't heard of him, but he has a kind of a funny name and you should check out his YouTube video. And I think you should, he'll be president one day. And so I went on YouTube and I actually looked up his video. This is his 2004 convention speech.
Oh yeah, the speech.
The speech.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, this guy's gonna be president. I joined the campaign. And
how do you just join the campaign?
You know, honestly, people are amazed by that these days. But to be honest, like at that time, Obama was polling like 1%. I mean, like he was like nobody. You know, I mean, he was some random senator. He was just elected like 3 years ago, and like, you know, nobody knew his name. And you know, you got to remember this. Like Hillary Clinton was like the machine. Like she was like
the establishment.
Yeah, she was the establishment. Like everybody knew who she was. And like, yeah, anybody could just join the campaign because there was nobody there. Like,
so did you just go to one of their offices, or how does that work?
No, I mean, you know, it's still digital, right?
Okay.
So you start getting on these conference calls, and they're like, hey, we can use your help doing this and that and whatever. And so, you know, they say, hey, we need help with this technology thing. Can you help us out, like analyzing social media? Hey, we need help with this field thing. Can you help us organize some volunteers? I was in Maryland at the time. I was growing up in Maryland, and if you think about the geography of Maryland, it's smack dab right north of Maryland is Pennsylvania, and then right below it is Virginia, and then below that is North Carolina.
Yeah.
So
for the non-American viewers,
right,
that represents.
So Maryland is like deep blue Democratic.
Yep.
Pennsylvania is like the prize. Like if you win
swing
Pennsylvania,
state,
swing state, like, you know, it was like you basically are on your way to winning.
Yep.
Virginia and North Carolina had basically not gone Democratic in like decades. You know, basically the strategy was that we would organize people from the Democratic base in Maryland, and then we sort of move them around to Pennsylvania, volunteers and things like that, Virginia, to try and identify voters that would support President Obama or Senator Obama at the time, and then take them out to vote. And so I remember like for almost a year, I was just like knocking on doors and organizing people and like on conference calls at 11 or 12 in the morning, and like
when you were 16.
When I was 16, yeah. And you know, I remember like, you know, one time we basically bussed all these people from Maryland down to Richmond, Virginia, which is like the battleground of the battleground. You know, like we didn't have an office, so like we basically found like a local church that would support us, and so like I had people sleeping like on the church, in the church pews, like with, you know, pizza boxes like in the back and stuff. And so that is like my sort of how I envision politics. And there was this one quote that Senator Obama said while he was campaigning that really stuck with me even to this day. And it was that if you can change a person's mind, that person can change a room. And if you can change a room, you can change a city. If you can change a city, you can change a state. And if you can change a state, you can change a country. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that politics is not like this thing you watch on CNN or like people debating on the congressional floor. It's winning the hearts and minds of people one by one in each room around the country. And I think that when you realize that that's an extremely empowering idea of politics, because that means that you as an individual have the opportunity to make a nationwide change.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so going back, you know, I came off the Obama campaign, and then you know, I really wanted to be a politician. And so I ended up running for the Board of Education at 17, got elected, served there. I thought I was going to be on this like pathway, right? You know, I was going to run for the assembly and then run for Congress and then, you know, whatever.
So at that point, just becoming, the idea of becoming a lawyer is now just an afterthought almost.
Well, I think it was like, let's become a lawyer first, and then that sort of ends up becoming a politician. But then maybe 2010, you know, this is the rise of the Tea Party and the
far right,
radical and
right, yeah.
Broader extremism in the country and the like. And the political climate was becoming extremely toxic. And I don't know what it was, but I didn't feel like politics was the place where you can make the most change, right? So like, you got to imagine myself like coming off like this idealistic, you know, sort of campaign and working for, you know, Senator Obama, and sort of like having this like broad level of idealism. And then you get into the political sphere and it's like really rough.
In what sense?
The first thing is that real change is actually really hard to accomplish. Legislative, regulatory change, political change. It's not just a question of who has the best ideas. It's also a question of who has the better marketing, who's the angrier side, all the stuff that sort of doesn't really have that much to do with the political or the policy landscape, if you will. Well, I was really drawn to politics because of this idea that you can make a lot of change. And so I started, you know, this is when I started looking around, you know, I was like, oh, you know, who else is making change in society, blah, blah, blah.
But at that time, when you were thinking about, okay, maybe it's not exactly the politics that's the right path, but again, because of the fact that you helped out on the campaign, Senator Obama actually became president, And then what happened to you? Like, did you get some sort of recognition for that? Did you end up working in the White House?
No, I don't want to overstate like my role in the campaign. I was just one of many people helping out, right? I was also like 17, right? I mean, I was just still finishing up high school and whatnot.
Were you the youngest? Like, I don't know. What's the person called?
Like organizer. Yeah, no, there are definitely a lot of people my age for sure.
Really? Wow.
Maybe not a lot, but there are a decent number of people my age for sure.
When he actually became president, did you actually get to interact with him?
Yeah, I mean, a couple events. Yeah, but I think most of my colleagues who were in the Obama campaign, they went on to other campaigns, or some of them, went to go work at the White House. Some of them went to go work in the party. For me, the main thing was my parents really wanted me to go to college. So, and I was really young, and so I needed to go to college, and that kind of there was some time to think about what I wanted to do. That was really informative for sure, to sort of take a step back and I've been on this pathway trying to be a lawyer / politician for a while. Like, is this the right pathway, and is this really what I want to do in the future?
Mm-hmm. Then how do you sort of transition from thinking that, and what steps do you take to figure out the next steps?
I was really disillusioned with politics. And so the first thing that I did was I thought about what things I wanted to change in society, right? Like, what are the things that like I'm unhappy with, and you're like an 18-year-old kid, like you're thinking, like you're angry at the world, and like no one understands me, and I'm thinking, okay, like I don't like how like the healthcare system like bankrupts people in America. I don't like the lack of affordable housing. I don't like the fact that the country doesn't have like a national technology or policy or some like all these different things. And so then you start thinking, okay, well, what is the pathway for me to make those changes in society, right? Like, I was lucky enough to go to Princeton, and I like was surrounded by all these brilliant people and had these like really late night conversations about, society and politics and economics and the like. And I think two things that emerged. So I'd always had this idea that politicians were the ones that created change in society. And the thing that sort of like broke my idealism was when I started really looking at Silicon Valley. There's a lot of backlash today in Silicon Valley, but you have to think of all these innovations that came out of the Valley, right? The personal computer, the smartphone, the internet, all these different things. When I was going through high school and into college, this is actually when the iPhone had first come out, right? And so this is like the first proliferation of mobile devices. And it used to be like the old like Razor flip phones used to have, and then suddenly we had all these like little like keyboard little phones, and then now we get these like touchpad phones and the like. I was like constantly reading in the news about like every single day there's some new innovation. Suddenly you can have a doctor in the palm of your hand, or you can call a car, anywhere you are in the world, or whatever, right? And so I just felt like that the future of society was going to shift towards technologists. And a lot of people call today's technology age the second industrial revolution, or the third industrial, however way you want to call it. So if you rewind back to the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th century, the people that really built the country in America, in many ways, you could point to the folks like McKinley or Garfield or whatnot. You could, but I think most people would probably point to Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Gould. These folks who physically laid down the railroad tracks, built the oil pipelines across the country, built the skyscrapers in our cities. And then basically reoriented sort of a modern capitalism. Now, they broke a lot of rules, and they had a lot of flagrant violations of human rights and the like, which they definitely, it's definitely wrong, but when you look back to that Industrial Revolution and you think to today's Industrial Revolution, the people that are really pointing the innovation and the forward movement of society are the technologists. They're the innovators, they're the entrepreneurs, they're the creators. They're essentially the ones that are building things and creating new things that people consume. And then the government really, like, what is the role of government when the pace of change is so fast in the private sector? Well, the role of government is to make sure people don't get hurt by all this change is happening, at the same time. So then the question is, do you want to be someone who builds the railroads, or do you want to be the person that tells the railroad builder, like, here's the length of the railroad and like how many, all the stuff. Like, I would rather be the person building the railroad, So I think that's the thing that kind of clicked in my head. And I just started going down this rabbit hole of like startups and entrepreneurship and technology and blah 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 blah. And that's like almost completely how I like 180'd into the technology field.
Wow. I mean, you did major in, you said, computer science, so you knew how to code and everything.
Yeah, well, I didn't major in computer science, but I took a lot of computer science courses, and I like did a little concentration in computer science. My senior thesis actually was at Princeton. It was actually about data privacy regulations in the United States. So I basically took the top several thousand websites in America, and then I tried to see how many of them actually complied with data privacy regulations in the U.S. And lo and behold, like almost none of them did. But the point is that like I had always wanted to meld my two interests. I'd just been so interested in politics for such a long time. And then suddenly like I started developing these like technical skills and engineering skills. And so I would say like probably through the middle of college and the like, I really thought that I was gonna earn like a more technical background and then go back into government. Like basically work on things like data privacy regulations and internet policy in the Middle East and all these different things that really required people to really understand technology and politics.
Because most politicians would know nothing about technology.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think that changed very rapidly, right? One of the biggest experiences that I remember going in high school and college was the Arab Spring and the way in which protesters in places like Tunisia and other places were using Twitter or mesh networks or Bluetooth technologies to essentially evade government restrictions and to communicate with one another and to organize protests. And I felt like, oh my God, this is like, if you really understand technology, you can make huge political change. And so that was the initial intent. And then, I kind of got swept up into the entrepreneurship world. But yeah, I was really always trying to merge those two interests together.
So at that point, did it ever occur to you that, hey, maybe I'll actually try to start a proper company, like a startup? And then did you know anything about how to go about building a company?
Well, I can't say that I had very high expectations for myself about starting a company. Really, FiscalNote, the company that, my first company that I started.
Yeah, because it's like the first company you ever started. Most entrepreneurs would go through a series of failures, but then boom, like one company, one IPO. And well, so, like, yeah. First of all, you should briefly explain to our viewers what is FiscalNote and what is it exactly that FiscalNote does.
Basically what FiscalNote does is we collect all of the laws, legislation and regulations that the governments are passing around the world, right? So Congress passes certain laws, there's the European Commission, there's the Australian Parliament, and basically we collect all those laws and we make it searchable for people, right? So if you want to look up Indonesian tax regulations, or you want to look up environmental legislation in France, or you want to look up how to sell pharmaceuticals in Mexico, people can essentially go to our software and they can type in any number of issues and they can see how the laws are changing, what politicians are voting on, what regulators are contemplating. So that's basically Fiscal in a nutshell, right? We are basically the software platform that allows people to really understand what governments are working on at any given time. You can imagine this is really, really important for governments, right? So as they're trying to conduct diplomacy. So, if you are trying to create some new trade negotiation around how cars are sold from one country to another, or if you're trying to conduct some research around military spending, in an ally country or something, right? So basically we sell part of our software to the government, to different governments around the world. And then we sell part of our software to companies. So you can imagine like a big food company or pharma company or oil and gas company that really needs to understand these regulations. And so a good example, this is during COVID. You saw this wave of regulations, right, by governments. You're allowed to open up restaurants, you're not allowed to open up restaurants. You're allowed to go here, you're not allowed to go here. And so companies really come to us and they say, okay, well, tell me what laws I need to follow. And then we also help a lot of nonprofits. So nonprofits and media institutions that need to report on the laws, or they need to help their constituencies or a certain set of voters who really care about a certain issue. And so, FiscalNote today, we power over 5,000 organizations. We are actually,
crazy. Yeah,
yeah, it's a lot of companies and organizations. Our customers include everyone from the executive office of the president, so President Biden's executive office, all the way to the Joint Chief of Staff, the Department of Defense. Every member of the House and the Senate in the United States Congress is a customer of ours. The Federal Reserve, the CDC, NIH, about half the Fortune 100, typically in their legal departments. And then I would say thousands and thousands and thousands of trade associations and political parties in Washington and Brussels, in Beijing and Singapore and Sydney and Korea and Tokyo, who all rely on our services to participate politically. And so that's the company that we built from scratch.
And this software, this platform is powered by AI?
Yes.
So that's something that's an advantage that you guys have.
Right. So we basically use AI to collect all these laws and regulations and automatically analyze and research it for our customers. Oh
my, that's so relevant, especially in the era of ChatGPT and everything. So, so exactly how did you get this idea when you were starting a company? And is that the initial vision that you had, that everything just went according to plan?
Well, I mean, everything didn't go according to plan, but I think the original idea has still stayed the original idea. So
how old were you when you came up with this? Okay, so now I'm super into technology, Silicon Valley. I want to do something for myself and actually create something.
So I was about 21, going on 22, when I started this company. You know, I don't remember if I had like a big eureka moment. I was just sort of sitting in my dorm room in college. I was a junior at the time, and I was thinking about different ideas. And
was this in Princeton?
It was at Princeton, yeah.
Right.
I think that, you know, there was a business that I really respected a lot, and this is Bloomberg. And so, you know, for the non-American viewers, Mike Bloomberg built this gigantic financial data and news company. And then he went off and he became, you know, the mayor of New York City and like, you know, all these different things. And now he's like this gigantic philanthropist helping out on a number of issues from climate change to gun control and the like. The Bloomberg terminal, basically, if you look on any Wall Street movie, like they always show like this computer with this colorful keyboard and the like that shows all the little stock tickers and stuff. That is the Bloomberg terminal. And so the Bloomberg terminal essentially had revolutionized Wall Street, like by computerizing the industry and allowing traders and investment bankers and everyone to sort of have this financial data all together for the first time. And I felt like the legal industry was going to go through a similar revolution where politicians and diplomats and lawyers and anybody who dealt with the law was going to need to, they were going to need real-time information about laws and regulations around the world. And so that was really the original idea. I don't know if there was like some inspiration or anything, but I thought of the idea in my dorm room. I literally went on my computer. I opened up my MacBook sitting at my dorm room desk, and I incorporated the company and I registered the name FiscalNote.com. And then it was really off to the races from there.
So you didn't have any like co-founders, or you had to go recruit your co-founders, or what?
Yeah, so I recruited 2 other co-founders. They were 2 friends from high school. And so, you know, we'd always be like chatting, like in our, I think it was like AIM chat back then, like, you know, like of different ideas that we had. And like, you know, we were debating different ideas. And I think at one point, one of my friends, Jonathan, who ended up becoming our CTO and one of my co-founders, he said, "Tim, this is the best idea that didn't suck." So they ended up joining and we ended up, you know, starting the company together.
Yeah. And so maybe you can walk us through what was that initial formative years of the company and maybe the struggles that you guys went through, because, you know, you told me some stories and it's pretty funny. I mean, not funny to me because, you know, sometimes I go through the same thing, but, you know, like, because most people think that it's easy to start a company and you just get funding and everything just like, you know, is smooth sailing from there, but that's not really the case. Or was it?
Yeah. So we definitely didn't know what we were doing for sure. I mean, you have to remember, we were literally 21 years old.
And did you think about dropping out of college for that, or?
So at this point, I actually had pretty much finished up all my courses in college.
Okay.
So I kind of had a free year, basically. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I thought, you know, why not? Let's just start this company. I just gotten accepted to Harvard for business school, and I was like, oh, you know, if this fails, I'll just, you know, go do my MBA or whatever. And, you know, we were 21 years old at the time, and I remember I was in my co-founder's basement, and we were watching The Social
Network.
Network.
Always the basement.
You know, we were in his parents' basement, and we were watching The Social Network, right? The movie had just come out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool, you know? But so in the movie, there's a series of scenes, but basically they go from their Harvard dorm room, and then like literally like 2 minutes later in the movie, they're like in this gigantic Silicon Valley office. And there's like hundreds of employees all coding together. And like, I was like, oh, you know, that's really, like the movies always make it seem so glamorous. You know, and like in the movie actually, they're like going to Silicon Valley parties and like, you know, like they meet, you know, investors in like a nightclub and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, that's, you know, I wish it was that glamorous. But really our story was, we had a couple $1,000s from some summer savings. I think we had like $6,000 or something like that. You know, we said, you know, what we're going to do is we're going to fly to Silicon Valley. Why not? You know, because this is where all the founders go. And so,
But did you know anybody there before you went?
I didn't know a single person in Silicon Valley. So we bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco. Actually, it wasn't even San Francisco, it was San Jose Airport, because I didn't know you had to book a ticket to San Francisco Airport. And then we went on Craigslist and tried to find an apartment. And we should have done it before going there, but but we had found this like Motel 6 room. And so I think we were paying like $50 or $60 a night. You know, it was like the three of us and then actually one other engineer friend that we'd brought over. So 4 guys. Yeah, we really couldn't afford anything. So we looked around for these apartments. We couldn't find anything because, you know, again, we're 21 years old and we're looking for month-to-month housing in Silicon Valley, which like it was exorbitantly expensive and we were never going to get it. I think at the time we were paying ourselves like $500 a month, and we found this Motel 6 room that we were staying in, which is right next to this Burger King. And so like every morning we'd like smell the Burger King, we'd go downstairs and get stuff off the dollar menu, and like that's basically how we lived for a couple of months. During that time period, we sat down every single morning, you know, with our laptops open, and we said, you know what, like we're gonna build this company. So we were sitting there coding, and then we opened up Google spreadsheets, and like we bought these burner cell phones from 7-Eleven, and then we would like copy and paste prospective customers into Google spreadsheets, and we'd sit there cold calling customers. It was really, like I still remember to this day, like.
So this is before you actually had the finished product. You just start calling people up for pre-sales or something like that?
Yeah, we wanted to talk to people. Like, would you buy this product? How much would you pay? You know, is this a problem that you have? And at the same time, like, it'd be, you know, like us coding and then calling customers in the morning and coding, you know, like every single, and then eventually, I think like 6 months in, we were still in this Motel 6 room, and we were like, okay, you know what, like we need to get our act together. So at some point, we're like, we need to go pitch investors. Like, we can't keep paying ourselves $500 a month. We have to get out of this Motel 6 room. We have to like pay ourselves real salaries. I remember like I was going up and down Silicon Valley, and you know, like I was like walking these super fancy offices in Sand Hill Road, and like nobody really understand, like, you know, they didn't really understand like what we were working on. This is the famous story, I guess, but you know, we were watching Shark Tank one night. It was like midnight, and we're like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if Mark Cuban was an investor in this? And so like we just kind of ruminated on that. The next day, I went to pitch an investor in Chicago, and you know,
you went to Chicago.
I went to Chicago because I was like pitching an investor, and then in the airport, actually, you know, my co-founders were sitting there coding and calling customers. I just wrote an email to Mark Cuban, and it was like a 4-line email.
Super short, to the point.
Very, very super short, because I thought he was a busy guy, you know. And so I went on Google, looked up literally Mark Cuban email address, and then I went to the contact us page of his like TV company.
Right.
And then his email is right there. So I copied it, and then I was like, hi, my name is Tim. I'm working on this idea, blah, 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 blah. And then he responds within like 45 minutes.
Wow.
I was so shocked at this. I was like, oh my God, Mark Cuban responded. So, and then he starts shooting a series of questions over, like just in rapid fire over email. I think my co-founders had gone out to dinner at the time, and I called them on the phone. I was like, guys, get out of dinner. Like, go straight back to the office, and we're going to answer these questions, you know? So we sat there answering questions, and he ended up being our first investor. So at the end of this email chain, Mark is like, how much are you raising? And I was like, oh, we're raising $740,000. And he's like, I'll do the entire thing.
Wow.
So he wrote a check for $740,000, deposited into our bank account. And it was like so much money at the time.
Yeah. And you guys never even met in person?
No, we never met in person. Some people, I guess, heard that Mark Cuban had invested, and then we brought in NEA, which is the largest venture capital firm in the Valley at the time, and then Jerry Yang, the founder of Yahoo, came in, and it was really just off to the races. We raised, you know, 1.3 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but you know, as you know, and as a lot of startup founders know, that's probably enough to pay for like 8 or 9 people for 18 to 24 months at most, if you draw down in the offices and everything else. And so I remember from that day, I pulled out a whiteboard in this like, tiny little office that we got. Every single day I wrote on the whiteboard how many days of cash we had left in the bank. Every morning I'd go and wipe it down, and I would say like, here's how much cash we have. And I would just show us that there was that much urgency to build a product, scale the business, and get to the next stage as quickly as possible.
So at the time, you guys had all that cash and you had limited run rate, which is, I mean, reasonable run rate, but it's still limited nonetheless. And you still didn't have like a final product yet.
Well, at that point we had a product and we had a prototype, and we had a couple, like maybe at that point we got our first customer maybe 7 or 8 months into the business. And then it was just like a snowball from there. Like we got our second customer, our third customer, and then our fifth customer, and then our 10th customer. But ultimately, like we built this company like one by one by one. Like even every single employee, I think I interviewed almost every employee up until like employee number 200 or 300. Like they sat in my office and like, for 15, 30, 45 minutes, and I would interview every single person walking in the door. And like that's literally how we built the company from scratch.
As a early 20 something.
Then I was 21, 22, 23. Yeah, but it was definitely a learning experience for sure.
And then when you think that just when everything's like, have you big names backing you up, and you think that, okay, we're gonna get this thing done. But then there's this period in startups called Death Valley, where maybe after I don't think that many companies actually survive the first 2-3 years or something like that. So when was the like a real challenge that you guys experienced that, we could actually die?
So the first financing challenge we had was our Series A, the next round after the Mark Cuban round. So this was very, very stressful time for me. We were trying to raise, about $6 or $7 million because we needed to get to the next stage. Like, I had built a team of like 15 or 16 people. We had a functioning product. We had maybe like 20 or 30 customers at the time. Like it was like a fledgling business, right? But we were burning a lot of money. We were investing a lot in sales and marketing, and really trying to grow the business. And I needed more cash. This is what a lot of startup founders do. They go to Silicon Valley and they try and raise money. I actually had negotiated a term sheet. I had gotten a $7 million investment offer. For a lot of different reasons, the investment offer didn't pan out at the end. Basically we're at the situation where I had this offer and then I didn't have an offer. And when I didn't have the offer, I had 6 weeks of cash left in the bank. That means that I could make 3 payrolls and then we'd be out of money.
Wow. So you're literally just weeks away from just dying.
Yes, yeah. And I remember I took all of our employees. We had a very, very small kitchen at the time in our office. And I gathered them around in like a big circle. And then I said, here's the situation. We had an investment offer, which I told you about, but it didn't pan out the way that we wanted. We have 6 weeks of cash left in the bank. And this is a time for us to really pull together as a company. And I hope you can trust me that I can pull off this investment round. And so afterwards, I went into a room with my 2 other co-founders, and we just started strategizing. And then actually, my co-founders actually had one-on-ones with every single employee at the time. One by one, every single employee offered to give up their paycheck until the company had enough cash and had secured an investment round. And
so they all believed in the vision.
They believed in the company, they believed in the product, they believed in the vision, they believed in the team. And so every single one of them actually almost cut their pay down to zero. And you can imagine for some people, they were like in their early 30s and like, families and things like that. And I felt very, like there's a lot of pressure. Like I was probably 22 years old at the time. And I really needed to succeed in this one. So I remember flying to Silicon Valley. There's like a parking lot in the Stanford Mall, actually. Like this is right outside where all of the VCs are and the like. And I was like preparing for these meetings and stuff. It's like this rental car, and like it's so hot in the car, and like I just like was sitting there and like I just basically like I just had a breakdown. I mean, it was like so much pressure, like, and it was like I was like just in this like I remember this like bright blue rental car in the middle of Stanford, like trying to figure out like how to piece together a multi-million-dollar investment round.
That's an insurmountable amount of pressure, especially for a 22-year-old. But how do you even process something like that? Unless you had some leads already that I can see the end of the tunnel. Like, did you really feel hopeless, or do you feel like, no, I believe I can pull through?
You just have to get into execution mode. It's like, you're just like so singularly focused on this thing that I need to do. And like there's no other distractions and I need to do this thing and there's nothing else that's going to distract me from it, right? I think in terms of like processing it, like there was like a goal I needed to hit it, like I was just so singularly focused on it. Obviously like, started working my network and like, like contacting people that I knew, and like I like made this gigantic spreadsheet and like started like just iterating through it, faster and faster and faster. Like 5 or 6 weeks later, we did get another term sheet. We ended up closing that round and moving on from there. And so I think that time period was really rough for sure. It does, I wish I could say that was the roughest, but there's definitely rougher periods than that. I think that a lot of people don't realize that tech founders, almost every tech founder goes through one, if not multiple versions of that over and over and over again. I was reading a couple of years ago that tech founders and tech entrepreneurs have an extremely high rate of depression and sort of emotional, bipolarism or whatever the case is, because
I heard that too, yeah.
They subject themselves to so much emotional pressure that it's extremely difficult to dig out of. And, the reality is that not a lot of people can relate, right? It's like, most of your friends who, are from college, they're like, doing their jobs. So it's like, like you go out for drinks with some friends and they're like talking about how much they hate their boss and like, like this new project that they're working on. And then, like in the back of your mind, you're thinking about like, oh my God, how do you like stitch together this multi-million-dollar financing round and not have to fire like all these people, right? If I could do something again, like in the early stages, it would probably be having a better community of other founders that I could sort of rely on and talk to.
Otherwise, at the time you had nobody?
It was basically just me, like, and my co-founders and like, but it was like, we just didn't know anyone in the Valley, and we were just kind of building these things by ourselves.
Right.
I remember after our Series A into our Series B, the company just exploded. I mean, it was like, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but we went from like 0 in the first year to like 700,000 revenue the first full year. And then like 3 million in revenue the following year, and then like 10 million the following year. And it was just like the company was exploding, like in our headquarters, we had like, initially we had like this office space. And I remember going into the office and thinking, oh my God, how are we gonna fill all these seats? Like fast forward 9 to 12 months later, and then I got like accountants that are like at the front desk reception because they have no desks. And then like I had like operations people that were like stuck in like the like separate conference rooms because we just like totally just didn't have enough chairs. This is before WeWork, but we like found some co-working space from like an office like in a separate floor, and we just had to like rent out desks because I needed like customer support people like at desks. The company was just like exploding. When the company's doing well, I mean, like a lot of investors want to come in, and we were able to negotiate some great deals and bring on some great capital partners. I think we've been very lucky to have some great investors along the way. But more than anything else, I think that explosive time period in terms of growth was really where we started to like really build the company, like build the culture, build the operational processes. We started building the management team. We started thinking about our like operationalizing our product strategy. We started building like structured sales teams and marketing teams. Like this is like the nuts and bolts of like building, like a real like business at the end of the day, right? So, lots of mistakes to be made, but we had some great partners for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess what comes with that rapid expansion, because ultimately company is nothing but a collection of hopefully what you consider to be A+ players that are super talented and dedicated, but then we always go back to talent. Like you need to recruit the right person. As a first-time founder myself, you just come to realize how hard or difficult it is to recruit the right people, because you just never know. Right? You could interview them like 3-4 times, but then when it comes to those people who can execute and then just over-deliver, and you said you personally interviewed over like 200, 300 people, what do you look for when it comes to identifying those superstars? Or is that something that you can mold them into, like maybe they just come in fresh slate and then you just go like, yeah, we're gonna build you up?
It really depends on the stage of the company.
Yeah, let's talk about the early stage.
Yeah. For early stage, the most important thing is attitude. I call it like the wall busting feature. Like they need to be able to like bust through walls over and over and over again. Like every obstacle you put in front of them, it's just like they blast through it. It's like there's this thing, they blast through it. There's this thing, they blast through it. It's like,
so it doesn't matter what their particular skill sets are.
No, I mean, they need to have some basic skill sets, right? But like, it doesn't matter if they're an engineer or a marketer or a salesperson, operations person. I remember there's a story of one of our operations people. We needed to set up an office in India, right? Like, for a bunch of different things. the story goes that like we dropped this operations person in the middle of India, like literally just handed them like a corporate credit card and said, go build an office. Like,
seriously?
Yes, yeah. And so like they got a hotel room, like booked a hotel room, they like rented an office, they interviewed the general manager, the first like several employees, and they just built the team like from scratch. That's the type of person you need in a company, right? Like you hand them a task,
right,
and you get like the entire world is against them and they can go fix it. Like,
okay, so the ultimate problem solvers, how do you look for that in a candidate?
You just have to, I mean, like the interview is like any type of thing, right? It's like you ask questions and stuff, but like, you know, first of all, I think that the batting average for recruiting and hiring can never be 100%. And frankly, it's probably not even 80%. Like if you get like 50, 60%, you're probably doing pretty well. The reality is that, you know, as human beings and as individuals, we're all very complicated people, right? Like we have our own incentives, we have our own dreams, we have our own skill sets, we have our own pace of learning, and they're not like set in stone. They constantly change.
Yeah.
So for instance, people that may be a fit at a certain stage cannot be a fit, they may not be a fit, you know, in a different stage. And so it is hard to hire for because basically what you're doing is you're trying to shoot a moving target and you're trying to see if that person will move with the company or not. And oftentimes they don't. To answer your question around like, you know, how do you interview for that? It's really hard and it's very intangible. And so like I ask a lot of questions around like, tell me, how do you overcome like a hardship? Tell me about a time you overcame a hardship. Or one of the things that I always ask managers when I interview them is tell me about somebody that you mentored. And like you're looking for very specific things in their past of things that they've done. And if you talk to a manager or a leader or somebody who wants to be a manager and they can't tell you a single time that they mentored a single person, then they shouldn't be a manager, right? Like, so like there's certain things, like if you're looking for somebody who overcame an obstacle, then you ask them the types of obstacles that they came over and they can't name something or they blame other people or whatever, then you know pretty instantaneously, right? So like, I think after interviewing a bunch of people, even for me, I can tell within the first like 10 minutes, like whether or not this person's gonna be a fit, like culturally. And you know, it's sort of a thing that you develop over time.
So you kind of knew that when you hired that person to go to India or maybe other countries and just build a team there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the best performing people, the people that have made the most impact in our company, are people, and it could be as strange as doing that, or it could be in engineering and say like, hey, we've got this big infrastructure problem, like, can you retool this entire infrastructure and can you do it within 3 months or 6 months? Like it's a multi-million-dollar project. It's really screwing with our customers. We need to fix this, you know? Or we're trying to launch a new product and I need a marketing team on this. Like, we need to come up with a million, like, you know, creative ideas, which, like, what's the approach? Like, how we're going to do this? Like, how we're going to do this within the budget constraints that we have? Like, some people, you want to find people, like, you give them a lot of constraints and obstacles, which startups are, and then they just keep pushing through those obstacles. And every time a company pushes through those obstacles, it grows a little bit more, right? So that's why, like, you know, I think attitude is probably the most important. Like, it's so important when building that initial team.
Well, I guess the more important question is, especially we're in Asia or Korea, do you notice any cultural difference in the way, even when it comes to attitude or like this proactive problem-solving type of skills? Are those talent like easier to find in countries like the US, where maybe they just grew up more of like that, more of a confrontational style, and you know, they're just not afraid to speak out or things like that? Or
I don't think so. I mean, I think, you don't have to be a rule breaker. Right? You don't have to break the law to like build a great company, right? You know, look at China. I mean, China has like is teeming with like brilliant entrepreneurs and like people that are busting through walls. And every single day you hear about, you know, someone who was a farmer and like, you know, an English teacher and then became like, you know, started some like mega internet company or something. Like, just the sheer grit and resilience of like people who work their way through it. And one of the things I'm always impressed by across Asia actually is the sheer hard work that people put in. It's like
that's true.
The level of effort, and it's unbeatable. I think it's just the engine of like growth, you know. And so everyone from like the moment you get out of the airport, you know, at the taxi drivers all the way to like, the people in restaurants to the tech founders and everyone in between, like everyone's working really, really, really hard, right? So I do think that, like as a society, that sort of hard work and effort is sort of ingrained into like the culture. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I think that Asian cultures have always been a lot more communal and more sort of society-based and instead of individualistic. And I think that is changing a lot for sure in the 21st century. It serves as a plus and a minus for sure. And so the same way that, individualism in America serves as a plus and a minus.
Yeah.
So, like I think in Korea or Japan or China or whatever the case may be, the individual nature of like their cultures does inform like some great companies or great ideas to come out. Like there's a reason why Korea is increasingly becoming like the content and like beauty capital of the world. It's because of the individual characteristics of Korean society, the hyper competitiveness, all these different things that sort of create like the perfect environment for these things to exist, like makes it globally competitive. So it just depends on the individual culture of the country.
A lot of good insight for the first-time founder like me. So we are very particularly interested in especially expanding. And I think we've gone through a pretty rough couple of years as a company, as you know. And I think we sort of kind of came out of that okay. But yeah, when it comes to trying to scale our operation, I think just that's a whole different level of challenge in and of itself. So it's actually quite interesting to hear how you overcame those obstacles. But then again, did you have a mentor or somebody that was sort of guiding you along?
I had a lot of great mentors, business mentors and personal mentors and leadership mentors. This is actually one thing that I specifically sought out when I was building my company. And I really, really, really wanted to find great advisors. I wanted to find folks who were like at the top of their fields and like basically convince them to mentor us. There's a guy named Chris Liu who was a cabinet secretary for for President Obama. He was Senator Obama's chief of staff, and actually at one point was the highest ranking Asian American in federal government. I went to him and I was like, hey, can you mentor me? There's another guy, Y.S. Chi, who is the chairman of Reed Elsevier, which is one of the largest publishing companies in the world. I asked him, can you mentor me? General Stan McChrystal, great leadership expert, operational expert. Alec Ross, who is the chief innovation officer, senior vice for innovation to Secretary Clinton, who is an expert in foreign policy and the like. These folks, I like specifically sought them out and asked them to be advisors and mentors. And every time I had an issue or like I needed their advice on something, I could rely on them to basically help me out with some major thing.
But the fact that you have access to these people, that you can just call them up or, hey, could you mentor me?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as Mark Cuban. Like I found them online, got introduced to them, or sent them a cold email, and then.
Oh, so you did send some of them cold emails, or?
I did, yeah.
You must be pretty good at that then.
Oh, I think we show people that we try really hard and that we're serious. Like that, we have a very big idea, we have a very big vision, that we're very committed to seeing it succeed. And I think people are really drawn to that. Whether it's great mentors or investors or employees, like I think that the role of a startup founder is like you're like in this three-ring circus. You have like all these people that are like watching the center. Like, you have these investors and employees and customers and advisors and mentors and like the press and everything. And your job is to keep the entire show going, right? Like, so you have to basically show everyone that everyone's headed in this direction, that we're all working towards something bigger. And I think that people are really drawn to that. And I
especially smart people that are not just driven by money, right?
Yeah, I mean, smart people, but I think most people are. Like, I think people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And I think people want to feel like they're contributing. And, this is something that I feel even to this day, that it's really, really important for a CEO of any company, like a 3-person company or a 3,000-person company, to draw a direct line between the work that somebody is doing and then like the ultimate goal of the organization. There's always that very famous story, right? Which is JFK is walking through, the halls of NASA, and then he asks the janitor, hey, what are you doing? And the janitor says, we're sending a man to the moon, right? Like, like basically every single person in this organization believes that that their contribution, however small or however big it may be, is contributing to this larger goal.
That's such a great reminder, though.
Yeah, it is. And like, it's just, you're trying to bring people back and center it back to the mission.
You said that, the first your depressive phase of like parking lot that you said wasn't the worst even of the kind of like the lows you had. So how does it get actually worse than that?
Well, you have that issue,
Yeah.
except you multiply it by hundreds of people. Like, I mean, look, I think it's the same issue, right? You are building this company, you need capital. Now, instead of having 15 or 16 people around a kitchen table, it's you have 200, 300, 400 people, and the stakes get higher and higher and higher. You now have global offices, massive like layers of management, and like you're on the clock to raise capital. And if you fail, like it's an extremely public failure with like hundreds of people losing their jobs.
Wasn't it possible at that point, even when you're at 200 people capacity, to rather than raising investment, is it possible to generate revenue and make enough profit to be able to cover for?
You can, yeah. But I think that's a very drastic move for a startup that's in a certain phase of growth. Look, the reality is that when you're building a company, you're sort of watching revenues ramp up. Like you're like watching sales quadruple, quintuple, like 600-700% every 18, 24 months.
Wow.
And in order to drive that level of growth, you have to spend a lot. I mean, you have to invest in more salespeople, you have to invest in more marketing, you have to hire engineers to build the next product. Like you have to do all these things to keep the engine going. The reality is that that's how once you take venture capital, that's the expectation, right? Like the way the venture capital model works is, and I'm not saying that it's correct or not correct, it's just that
it's the way it is.
It's the way it is. The venture capital model needs winners, right? Because like the venture capital model, basically like a VC invests in like 20 different companies, maybe like a third of them fail, a third of them like, kind of don't really reach like the stars, and then like maybe one or two of them reaches like a complete huge exit or something, and it pays for everything else.
Yeah.
So if you're an investor, that means that every single bet that you take needs to be one of those one or two that like really break out. And so these investors, they push companies really hard. I'm not saying that we made all the right moves, because we definitely made a lot of mistakes. I definitely was in positions where I hired the wrong executives. I spent too much money on certain sales and marketing initiatives. I hired the wrong number of people in certain departments, built products that were too costly or didn't generate enough revenue fast enough. But you have to that's just the nature of like building a startup. But in order to accommodate all those mistakes in the early stages, you have to raise enough capital to keep driving the growth, but also be able to make those mistakes.
Right.
So you're ramping up this growth, you're hiring all these people, the losses sort of are going in a certain direction. Yeah, I guess you could take the business and slash and go straight to profitability, but I would say that's an extremely drastic move, and what ends up happening is like you just lob off your growth, and then you're kind of stuck on this no man's land where like you can't really grow, and then the investors sort of lose confidence, and then there's like you're kind of like in this spiral, right? It's like you stop growing, the investors lose confidence, you have to keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and that's just not. I don't think anybody wants to be in that type of environment overall. Unless
I guess you had to, because the market tanks, and then you'd like your VC, they just like. I mean, that's what happened for many companies, right? So they don't have no choice but to go for the profitability. When you say?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Realistically speaking, like obviously if you could build a great growth company with high rates of profitability, that's the best place to be. Financially speaking, for a software company like ours, you need to spend a certain amount of money to build the software that requires some investment capital. You hire a bunch of salespeople, you start paying their salaries and their commissions before they start ramping up and hiring or generating sales. And so like you basically are doubly spending money like over and over and over again to sort of generate higher rates of growth.
Right.
So, and typically like a salesperson will take 6 months or 9 months or 12 months to ramp up to fully sell, right? So like in that time period, you're paying for their salaries. And so you want to drive growth and you hire 20 salespeople, you're spending a couple $1 million without getting the relevant revenues, and so that's why you need the investment capital, right? Because you have to like basically spend the sales and marketing dollars to hire the people, train them up, and then they start generating revenue to offset their costs. So the one thing I would also say is, I was young, and this is sort of like the way that I was taught to build a company. I wouldn't say it's the right way or the only way. The mistakes that we made definitely like compounded along themselves for sure. And so,
what would you say were some of the biggest mistakes that maybe you just did it out of like ignorance, or like you just had to give it a shot? I don't know.
The biggest mistakes that I've always made have always been people related. So it's typically hiring an executive that you shouldn't have hired. And I always make this mistake. I've made this mistake for years, and I didn't correct it until like very recently. But I would always hire people for their resume, right? Like, because I was young, and you hire somebody from big name company X, like,
well, they went to a certain school. Right?
Yeah, they went to a certain school, or they led this many people at this big company, brand name company. And then you stick them they come from like a Fortune 500 company, and then you stick them in like a 100-person startup, and they just completely flame out, because they don't know how to operate in that type of environment.
So there is a pattern like that. Because I was hoping that, let's say, some of even the past mistakes we've made is like, maybe that's just more of an exception rather than the rule. But it is a different environment.
Yeah, it is a different environment. I think people who come from big company environments, and again, I'm not chastising them. They built their own careers in their own ways. They're used to having things done for them. Like they have big departments that do other things, or like they have armies of assistants or junior people or whatnot. You bring someone like that into a company, and of course they're going to flame out. Like they don't have the support infrastructure. They don't know how to operate in this like very fast-paced environment. But it actually gets even worse, right? Because what ends up happening is you hire this person, and then now they're in charge of like 20 or 30 other people like that work for this person.
Right.
And then that person, the executive, flames out, and then the 20 or 30 other people below them all flame out too. So
yeah, that I didn't think about. Yeah.
So basically, as a founder and as CEO, like it almost goes in this like step by step, right? Like you hire the wrong executive, the executive flames out, they either leave or you fire them, and then now you're suddenly managing this entire department yourself. And then, like, of course, you know the bandwidth for it, and so one by one people start leaving, and then you have to rebuild that entire organization from the ground up again, like all the junior people, all the managers, and the executive again. And so you basically imagine doing this for one department and then losing productivity of an entire 6 months or for a year, spending time paying salaries and all these expenses and like not hitting goals, and then have to rebuild it yourself. Like, that's a tremendous amount of work and a huge mistake. Like, you basically made a multi-million-dollar mistake, and it costs you 6 to 12 months of time of operating a certain department. So like that, those are the types of mistakes that are very hard to, I wouldn't say they're hard to overcome, but it's just a lot of work to work through for sure.
But you just kept making them over and over and over. Is it because of certain like temptation that they have this certain pedigree, or it's like, oh, not this time, I think it's gonna be okay? But because what's the alternative? Like, then you just hire somebody with no names, or it kind of goes back to the interviewing thing again, right?
Yeah. So over time, I developed this thing where I have like a management philosophy now. This is my personal philosophy, but this is just for our organization, which is I like to hire executives that are like on the bubble, which basically means that they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They didn't quite get to do this role at a separate company, or they're passed over for a promotion, or like
they want to prove themselves.
Right, like, or they are like, or you promote them from within the company because they keep like succeeding at different projects. So like they have the skill sets, they might not exactly have the experience, but they can like push through the bubble and get to becoming a great executive.
Right.
So like those are the people that I really try and find. Like, and it's a very thin line on that bubble. And sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. But I would say the moment I adopted this philosophy, it definitely pushed my success rate with executives maybe from like 50 or 60% to like 80 or 90%.
That's really high.
Because it's, again, like it's an attitude question, right? Because that fundamentally is an attitude question. So like basically I just distilled everything down to like, does this person really want it? Like, do they really want to be here? Do they want to succeed? Do they really want to do well at their job? That really is, like I wouldn't say it's the silver bullet, but it's like one of the big variances that I kind of started controlling for.
For those people who are not familiar with FiscalNote, how big did it get? And then how did you guys actually end up going public? And was that always one of your end goals? Yeah, we're going to go public in a certain number of years.
Going public is one of those things where like a lot of founders, they kind of dream about it, right? It's like, you want to get up on that stage and ring the bell, and which I ended up doing, but which was very fun. Yeah. As you're building the company, you go through sort of different stages of growth, and FiscalNote now is several hundred employees, like we're just under 1,000 employees. We have offices, from London to Brussels to India to Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, literally all over the world. As I mentioned, we have like these thousands and thousands of customers. And so it's a growing mid-sized software company trying to become a big software company. And at some point you realize that you have to grow up as a company and that you need access to real long-term capital. Like, we can't just be in this situation where we're like jumping from one venture round to another venture round to another venture round. We also started making a series of acquisitions the last couple of years. And so it's very hard to do that with a private stock. Like, I need like a traded stock that people are actually willing to take to actually start acquiring companies and the like. So we made the decision as a company, as a management team, that we were going to take the company public. It wasn't really like an ego thing. It was more like we were evaluating a bunch of different options for the next stage of the company. Like, do we raise another venture capital / private equity round, or do we go public? Basically, do we stay private or do we go public?
Yep.
I think for us, it was the right time. We had built this gigantic infrastructure of managers and executives. We had been preparing for it for years. I think for 3-4 years or so. All the things that go behind the scenes in terms of taking up a company public, getting the legal components right, the accounting, the finance, getting a lot of professionalism in the organization, building out our board to make sure that like they could handle and withstand like the test of like auditors and regulators and the public pressures and the like. After it was all said and done, we basically said, let's take the company public, and we did. Going back to like our earlier conversation, it really doesn't change the company internally that much. Internally, the company's still focused on building great products, servicing our customers, and building a great culture for all of our employees. None of that changes. I think the day before we went public and the day after we went public, like if you walked into our offices, it looks exactly the same. The only difference is now everything that you do is just plastered, like on the internet and publicly and the like. And there's a lot more expectations about like if you make a promise about doing something, you have to go and do it. Like, so if I say I'm going to hit this revenue number this year, then I need to go do it. If I say I'm going to hit this profitability metric this year, I need to go and do it. Like in venture capital land, it's like, oh, you don't hit this month or next month. Like you can just do it next year, or like, you can take some more time, let it play out. But in the public market land, it's like, we're going to hit this target on this date, and if you miss it, then you miss it, and you're going to punish for it. So wow. That level of accountability is very, very, very high. So I think that if a company is not prepared to make public statements like that and keep their promises, it probably should not be publicly traded. That's the biggest lesson for sure. Again, we've been preparing it for such a long time that at some point we kind of got to that place where we felt very ready.
Mm-hmm. So how has your sort of role as CEO changed, or it didn't change at all, other than you probably making more public appearances and like appearing in CNBC or something?
The percentage of time that the CEO spends on internal operations definitely goes down a lot. I still spend a lot of time on M&A, on product, on working with our managers and our executives, but I also have to spend time meeting shareholders and investors and explaining to Wall Street and to the press about like what the company's working on, why we're investing in this thing, like why we made this acquisition, why we're launching this product, why we're entering this geography, because you have this common set of stakeholders that are now watching you and fully invested in you kind of growing the business. I think that you have to become a very, very strong communicator. It goes back to what I was saying before, which is that, this like 3-ring circus of like customers and investors and employees. Now you add like all the spectators and like the people that are betting on the things around you, and like there's like all these things that just get way more complicated, right? Yeah. Like the press that's outside watching you, like it's just a much bigger version of what you've already been doing, which is aligning people towards a common vision and a mission, and making sure that people are aware of like your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, and you're bringing the entire kind of group together.
But do you feel like you have the natural personality type, or does this suit you? Like, or do you feel like, oh man, it's just getting too much even for me, where I wish that I could sort of live a more private life, which is kind of ironic, but are you comfortable right now of being a CEO of a public company?
I don't think anybody's comfortable doing it. I mean, I think I read online that the average tenure of a public company CEO is like less than 3 or 4 years.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Even if they're the founders?
I don't know about founders, but I think if you look at all public companies, it's like, it's only a handful of years. Think about something like traveling internationally, right? Like, when you travel internationally, you have to think, oh, am I traveling during trading hours? And if something happens during those trading hours, like, who's going to like take care of this thing, or who's going to respond, whatever, blah, 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 right? So it's just like you have to change your lifestyle to accommodate the new public pressures. And the reality is that there's so many things that are out of your control, right? Like the Fed raises interest rates by a percentage point, and then the entire tech sector takes a bath, and like, you kind of have to deal with that, right? Like it's just stuff like that you don't even know about, that like completely impacts, your business. Generally speaking, I wouldn't say I'm comfortable, but I have accepted it, like that in order to build this company and make sure that it has the right long-term capital, the growth prospects that we want it to see, and for it to get to the next stage, I think that like this is sort of an inevitability to kind of get to that next stage overall.
I would really love to hear what your parents think of you now.
Well, I think there's this funny story. When we raised our Series B, my mom was still very hung up on me going to law school. And so I think you went to law school, right? So,
yeah.
I called my mom and I was like, hey, I raised, $10 million our Series B. And she was like, oh, that's great. When are you going to go back to law school? Right? Like, I think that changes over time. But sometimes, your parents just never let go of the fantasy.
Right. Well, what about Series C and then IPO? Like, what are their reactions?
Well, I think my parents definitely finally accepted it when we went to the New York Stock Exchange, and I was ringing the bell, the opening bell, and on the front of the New York Stock Exchange where the pillars are, like there was a huge, gigantic banner of FiscalNote, like they walked, up and down the trading floor on the stock exchange, and they saw like our logo and like
that's
ticker.
So surreal, yeah.
Like that's when they realized, oh, this is like a real thing.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. So I think they've accepted it now for sure.
Yeah. Have you thought about like stepping aside and almost like retiring though? Because technically you can if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I haven't thought about that, but I think I still am a huge shareholder in this company. I think I'm the largest individual shareholder in the company. I'm very financially invested and personally invested in making sure that the company is successful, that it gets to a long-term success. At some point, like the money is the money, but then there's like the aspect of building a great company, and you want to build great products that are beloved by your customers. You want to build a great environment that employees come into work every single day feeling like they're accomplishing something. Like all those things I think are intangibles, things that are very hard to replicate. Like I still to this day, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and I said, it's just so weird that like this idea that I had in my dorm room, like I just randomly made up a word like FiscalNote. And then now suddenly we have like all these people around the world that like wear our t-shirts and come into work and like they put it on their LinkedIns and like put on their resumes. It's just like, it's this whole thing like that we made up, but it just shows you that like you can just kind of like, you can just create something out of nothing and then it like suddenly becomes really meaningful. And so I think that's the feeling that is like the thing that I'm really, really chasing after is like trying to kind of build that thing,
I guess that rush just never goes away. So it makes you feel, but does that mean you want to start like another ventures, like another company, and you're just going to keep going?
Well, look, I'm still, as you mentioned, I'm still very young, like in my, I'm 31, right? So I would like, to have a really long entrepreneurial career. I want to see FiscalNote succeed for sure. And I want to keep like working on FiscalNote and making sure that the company succeeds. Eventually, I also want to like, make sure that I'm investing or helping build or, other companies and the like. And I'm doing that, right now by sitting on boards and investing and advising startups and a lot of other things. For better or for worse, I've developed this sort of years of experience watching an idea go to a prototype to a product to scaling the business and taking it public. And, hopefully I can sort of use that expertise to, help other founders and build other great companies.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I kind of asked you about your social aspect but it sounds to me like you've literally spent your entire 20s and now you're in your early 30s, but now you must be busier than ever. Like, I mean, even if I want to get through to you, I have to talk to like 3 of your executive assistants and chief of staff. So I don't know. What does your average day look like nowadays? It's just like constant traveling.
Yeah, it's a lot of traveling. I would say that I am at home in my apartment.
Where is your home?
In New York. In New York.
In New York,
yeah.
okay.
Well, I have a place in New York and DC. I kind of split my time half and half, but I'm at home probably like less than 20% of the time. There's some times when I'm in a hotel room and I wake up and I look at the ceiling and for like half a second you're like, oh my God, where am I? Like it's just like you're traveling from city to city all the time. When I turned 30 last year, I had this like big like reflection period, like for like a week or two. And I just was sitting down and thinking about like my 20s and how I spent it. And, you know, I think that there's definitely a lot that you miss out on. You know, and like it's a lot of things like, you know.
What about like basic things like going on dates, right?
Well, you know, I mean, you make do, but but I think like birthday parties, like for your friends and things like that, like you just end up missing a lot. I will say that I have never missed a wedding invitation. So I'm not even kidding. Even if it means like flying from like Mexico City to Seoul and then back to New York, like within a weekend, I've done that for sure, just to make sure that I'm at a wedding. Because like there's certain events where it's like hopefully once in a lifetime,
hopefully, yeah.
hopefully, and you want to celebrate with, you know, a friend of yours, right? So you just have to prioritize certain things. Like if it's important in your life, you'll make time for it. And you know, I'm not married, but eventually, like when I get married, I would like to make time to spend time with like future kids or family or whatever. And so I feel like that those things really matter. And right now, being unmarried, I have this like kind of flexibility, but eventually probably will have to like, you know, make some real priorities for sure.
I guess kind of where do you go from here? Because I also know that, you know, you're like a passionate advocate for certain causes. I mean, we talk a lot about politics, you know, in private, but do you actually see yourself running for office or getting back into the politics or something like that?
I always want to be politically involved. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to run for office. I think eventually everything comes down to politics. People think that politics is like, you know, the left versus the right, or it's like, you know, like they watch TV and it's in the 90s, if you remember in Korea, like people would like climb up on the dais and like they would take the gavel and like they like lock people in the rooms and stuff. It's not really what politics, I mean, that's part of politics. Politics in the purest form is about how we treat each other and our expectations of each other within society. And also at the highest level, the priorities that we as a society have. So if we as a society say climate change matters, then we prioritize the things that allow us to combat climate change, whether it's collectively saying we should tax ourselves in a certain way, or we should act in a certain way, or we should only sell certain things to each other in a certain way. Those are decisions that we make amongst ourselves as people, you know, to say that we care about this issue, we want to do something together. So I don't think that has to come through elected office. I think that can come through organizing people. I think that can come through speaking out on certain things. I think that can come through supporting individuals who are advocating for certain causes. For me, you know, doing all those things is being politically engaged. Like we talk about certain things, like I care a lot about minority representation, I care about immigration, I care about making sure that everyone has a great opportunity, you know, to succeed, you know, making sure that people have proper educations, that they have the base foundation to be able to succeed in the future. I think that, you know, giving people opportunity is the biggest thing that we can do as a society. And so
absolutely,
I don't know if that's running for elected office, but I think it's really just a function of finding ways in which we can create opportunities for each other in society. A community bank that is making small business loans to people for the first time to start their own companies, that is a version of politics, of like basically supporting a community and helping to foster opportunity and entrepreneurship and hard work and all these different things. You don't have to be an elected official to do that, right? So I think there's all these different ways you can make change in society, and that, I mean, I would love to be a part of that for sure.
I'll be curious to know your thoughts on the current state of all the divisiveness or polarization that only seems to be getting worse, not just in the US, but on a global scale, whether that's due to social media or mainstream media, because I know you also have a lot of interest in media as well. Why is that happening in your mind? And like politically, you just can't seem to engage the other side, the side of the aisle at all, without almost like becoming more tribal. So what's your take on that?
Two things. First thing is, this is a little bit more hopeful than your question, I guess. I think the median person, the average person, doesn't care about all those things.
I agree. The silent majority, right?
Yes, yeah. I think what people care about is they care about the families, they care about making a good living, they care about retiring at a good age, they care about being healthy, and they care about being able to make sure that their children, live a slightly better life than they had themselves. So I think that the media environment and the social media environment in general have created these echo chambers, and then this has been talked about over and over and over again about like how people only watch Fox News for a certain thing, people only watch MSNBC for a certain thing. They watch it specifically for a particular political bias that they care about. And so these echo chambers exist.
Yeah.
I think that's one aspect, 1A. I think 1B is, I think that the idea of truth is becoming more malleable.
Extremely subjective and feeling based.
Right. And so it's like, yes, that may be true, but I don't feel that's true, so it's not true, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that it's hard to argue in that type of environment. Our political systems, as they're currently constructed, at least in the US, are very reactionary to that type of stuff. And so it's very hard to build political parties or electoral constructs that sort of create that sense of kind of coming together. And instead, the political system benefits people who are the loudest and the people that are able to rally the left or the right or whatever, right? Part of that is the two-party system that we have and the very, very low voter turnout that the US has. In some cases,
around 40-50%.
That's in a presidential election. In midterms or in local elections, it's gonna be like single digits.
Oh, wow, that's pretty bad.
It's very, very bad. And so what that means is that the angriest people come out to vote, and so you're incentivized to be very angry. Generally what that means is it requires a couple things. The first is the realization that the average person doesn't care about most of these issues, and they actually care about practical issues like traffic, and they care about like taxes, and they
like
care
gas
about
prices,
education, gas prices, all these things. Like these are like practical things that people care a lot about, And so focusing away from like any topics that aren't very practical, I think that's the first thing, and realizing that most people care about those things. I think the second thing is getting people politically engaged, like all these people politically engaged. And I do think that the average person, if we had 100% voter turnout in America, I think that the politics of the society would be a lot more tame. It'd be a lot more practically focused. I do think that in this case, leadership matters a lot.
Absolutely.
And I think political leadership that is capable of tying together the issues that people care about and really speaking to the core of what most people care about, like that matters a lot. And so like it's easy for politicians to cater to those particular crowds, but I think it's harder to be practically focused, like because it's boring. Like focusing on like traffic, on small business taxes, on public education and like infrastructure. Like these are super boring topics relative to like the big left-right debates.
And whoever tries to take that route, though, they never get the attention that they deserve, right?
Right.
They get drowned out by the theatrics of the debates, or, you just like who's the most alpha or most entertaining, or who has the best one-liners or sound bites. Yeah,
and that's more a function of the media environment. But I think that this goes all the way back to like the Roman Empire and like the early versions of democracy and the like. I think communication still matters. Like I think the ability for someone to sit in front of a room, a couple hundred people, and explain something in a way that people relate with and are empathetic about, like that's a very hard skill set to have. And like the ability for an individual leader to connect with that many people at the same time is something very special. And so it's very, very easy to get people angry about things, but it's very hard to get them focused on practical solutions. So I feel like, we need better political leadership.
It sounds to me like you're announcing that you're gonna run.
No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that the smartest people that I know and some of the best leaders that I know actively avoid politics.
I know, yeah.
Because they just, it's a huge sacrifice. I think that it's very hard to shove yourself into a political situation like that. And I don't know. I'm very close to a lot of politicians. Like, some of them are mentors, some of them are my friends, my peers. And it's a very hard life. I mean, it's, 50% of the country hates you at any given time. Sometimes you're forced to do things that you're not happy about. I just feel like it's a huge sacrifice. And I think you have to have a very, very, very strong sense of public duty and willingness to kind of enter into the firestorm like that.
And in the midst of all these political environment, how do you see the Asian American community? Because I think they are sort of becoming a bigger presence. What's their population, right? Like percentage of the population?
Yeah, it's just under 6% or so,
right.
plus
but
or minus.
It's growing rapidly, right?
Yeah. I think that in any minority community, in order to assert themselves like in society a lot more, they need to have 3 core pillars of representation. So they need a pillar around wealth, they need a pillar around political representation, and they need a pillar around entertainment or media-oriented representation. All 3 things are very, very, very important. So the first pillar of wealth is primarily defined by entrepreneurship, and maybe some finance, but primarily entrepreneurship. In a capitalist society, of which America and most of the Western world lives in, the people that take the most risks and start businesses and go out of their way to do something, they're the ones that get rewarded economically speaking, right? They're the ones that own the shares, that own all the stuff, that take the big risks and sort of, they get compensated for it. So what we need is a lot of Asian Americans to start businesses and to be very good at it and to build the infrastructure around that. Starting businesses, investing in them, lending to them, taking them public, getting them acquired, all these things that needs to exist. Because it also enables the second thing, which is political representation. You need a pipeline of strong Asian American politicians that are supported by Asian American founders and entrepreneurs and investors. So Asian American politicians at the city council level, at the mayoral level, at the state assembly level, at the governor level, at the congressional level, eventually, hopefully, the presidency level. All these things, you need to have a pipeline of just constant people, and not just in the legislative branch and the executive branch, but also in the judiciary branch. You need to have Asian American judges and prosecutors and everyone else sort of in that grouping. And the last is you need Asian Americans in Hollywood. All the stuff around BTS and Parasite and all this stuff, that's just the beginning of getting Asian Americans as news anchors, as studio executives that are making decisions on screen and off screen around putting slightly more Asian Americans on screen or getting representation, those stories told every single day. So if you combine these 3 pillars of wealth creation, of political representation, and Hollywood representation, you get this very beautiful thing, right? Which is representation at all levels, and you get the ability to actually tell the stories and solve the problems that the Asian American community is facing, right? So things like immigration reform or healthcare reform or public education around 1.5 generation immigrants or whatever the case may be, right? These are all issues that are very specific to the Asian American community that can get resolved once we have a stable wealth of people, a political representation, and then the ability to tell those stories to the mainstream America. So I think that the progression of all these things is happening very fast. We're seeing a lot of tech founders, a lot of startup founders in Asia, that are Asian American. Some of the biggest names you can think of, from DoorDash to Fitbit,
yep.
And whatnot, all Asian American CEOs and founders. You have, strong Asian American politicians at every level of government, from Congress all the way to, the cabinet and whatever the case may be. Eventually, we will have our first Asian American Supreme Court justice. And then in Hollywood, the Gold House movement, all these different things that are pushing forward Asian American representation, I think they're all coming together in a really, really nice way. And so it's really great to see.
I'm guessing that you're playing quite an active role in all of those pillars at the moment, right?
I wouldn't say active, but I try and be supportive for sure. I mentor a lot of Asian American founders. I work with a lot of Asian American up and coming politicians. I am part of Gold House, and I work pretty closely with a lot of folks in music and entertainment and TV and the kind of film industry to, whether it's financing or casting or just supporting individuals. I think that's really, really important. So yeah, I mean, in my own very small corner of the world, I'm definitely trying the best that I can.
You've just accomplished so much by the age of 30, 31. What's the end game for you? What kind of impact would you want to have made by the time you reach the age of 40, let's say?
Yeah, I want to do more than I'm doing now. That's. I mean, I know it sounds very nebulous, but it's not like I entered 20 years old and I thought 30 years old, you know, I'd like to be doing this, right? So like, I think it's more just about like every year, every 6 months or whatever, I just think like, this is the best way that I can be spending my time for the skills and the experiences and like the things that I want to do. Like, is this the best way I can spend my time? So that's just like a recurring question, I guess, you know, and I don't know where my career is going to go for sure. I mean, I'd like for it to be in a direction that helps me make a larger impact to customers or investors or different ideas that I'm interested in. But like, I don't think that much has changed since like when I was in high school, right? Like I still work really, really hard. I still want to prove like to myself and to everyone else that I can do it. I know that this may sound weird to you or to anyone else, but I feel like you know, when I turned 30, I had this idea, like I tried to distill what I was feeling, like, you know, into a couple of different like theoretical concepts. And the two biggest feelings that I had, the first one was gratitude. Because, you know, like I don't think that I could have gotten to the stage without my parents and investors and supporters and customers, all these different things. But the bigger feeling, and just as big a feeling, was restlessness. Like I feel like I haven't accomplished everything that I want to accomplish, you know? And the feeling that you have when you have the word that you want to say, but it's on the tip of your tongue and you can't reach it. Or like when you're climbing a mountain and you can see the top, but you're like keep continuously climbing the mountain and you're not like moving towards the peak. You just keep seeing the peak, you know, because it just gets the peak getting higher, right? So that's kind of the feeling that I have is like, you know, I need to keep climbing the mountain. I need to like keep doing the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I don't know what that looks like practically speaking, but it's just something that I'm always thinking about for sure.
Well, I have to say, you know, as always, whenever I talk to you, just super inspiring. I take a lot of what you say seriously and try to apply it in my life, both in professional and personal capacity. So I guess lastly, if you have any advice for not necessarily founders, but like young people, it could be teenagers or people in their early 20s, and they're feeling a little lost, what advice would you give them?
There's a lot of pressure on people these days, like especially young people, you know, like parents, from, you know, teachers, from whatever, like people telling them they need to do this or that, like get good grades or like make a lot of money or whatever it is. And at this point in my career, what I would say is that you really just need to understand what makes you happy. And I know that sounds like really, really wishy-washy, but there's so many ways to be successful in the world, like, and to make money in the world. If you just follow your passion and like do things that you're interested in, like things will absolutely follow, opportunities will follow, right? Like, how could you possibly compare a concert violinist in like some national orchestra to like a sports athlete or tech founder? Like they're all doing the things that they want to be doing, like, and that's why they're successful. It's not like someone told them to do the thing that they're doing. Like they chose it because they liked doing it and they kept doing it and they kept doing it and then they like became the best in their field. And so, you know, if there's any piece of advice, it's like just try and be happy and pick something that you're interested in and work really, really, really hard at it.
And if they don't know what that is yet, they should try as many different things as possible to find out. Yeah,
you know, talk to people, you know, try a lot of things. I mean, not everyone figures out what they want to do really early on. I think people try a lot of different things. Like they try different jobs, they go to different industries, you know, they like take on different hobbies, and sometimes those hobbies become like, you know, real careers and the like. And so I do think that people should live life to their fullest. And sometimes, like, I feel this sometimes as well, like they're just like crushed under the weight of like responsibility, you know?
I feel like you're talking to me right now.
No, I mean, but I think if you enjoy what you're doing, that's the most important thing, you know, and really trying to find that as a North Star is something that, like, once you find it, you just grab onto it and you just ride it, you know, as far as you can.
I think that's the perfect note that we can end this on. So, well, thank you for your time. I know you're super busy. You just told me you just flew in literally just for this. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.